Okay, this video is called How to Help Your Kid to Be Smarter. There's a lot of things a parent can do to help their child to be smarter, to develop better intellectually. So always ignore those people who say you can't increase IQ. It's actually very easy, and we'll go through some of that here. So before birth, be careful about who you marry. In general, try to marry a smart person if you can. And somebody with a smart personality, not so much academic IQ, but their approach to life. Like for a man, men often go for the bipolar bimbo who sort of ruins their life and gets a divorce and destroys everything. Better to choose a woman who's not so attractive, maybe like a 5 in looks, but she's mentally, emotionally stable and she wants to work with you to raise a family, etc. Okay, don't live on a busy street, near an airport, or anything noisy. Don't live near smelly factories or coal-burning electric plants because all that air pollution lowers cognitive function. The noise of being on a busy street, besides the diesel fuel being a neurotoxin, it's distracting. And children who live near airports, they have lower IQs. And it's not just from the radar; it's also just because it's so noisy. Eat a healthy diet before you get pregnant. You'll be more fertile, and it increases the likelihood that the baby's going to be healthy as possible, and with optimal neurologic brain development. Don't necessarily trust everything your OB-GYN says. Most of them don't know anything about nutrition. Check out the prenatal vitamins. Some of them contain toxins. Okay, this one dentist was checking the vitamins and found they contain fluoride, the one that were given to his wife. Fluoride lowers IQ. You don't want that. Some contain cadmium or other problems, so research them very carefully, for if they contain food dyes, titanium dioxide, or other problems. People are healthy as eating a low-fat, low-sodium vegan diet. All these so-called supplements are not necessarily beneficial. They'll quote some out-of-date, incorrect paper, and once something gets into the standard of care, it gets done over and over again, even if it's completely wrong and stupid or even harmful. Try to breastfeed as long as you possibly can. Take as much time off the mama as she can to breastfeed. It's so much better than formula. Beware of infant formulas. They'll contain sometimes aluminum from the can, BPA, plastic liners in the can, soy, hexane, F minus, etc. Hunter-gatherer women often breastfeed 3 to 4 years. By the way, I'm just going through a little bit of introductory baby stuff. I'm going to get into this stuff. Basically, this lecture will cover from birth until about beginning of college. If you're going to have formula, then often people end up with some of that. Don't stand near the microwave. Microwaves are not very well radio frequency shielded, so a lot of people would heat the baby bottle in a microwave. Never do that if it's plastic, and never do it. Never stand near the microwave with the kid. That's stupid. Classical music is good for the child with a pleasant melody, not too loud. You don't want to be too loud, hurt the kid's ears. You don't want something that's kind of unpredictable like Beethoven, but something sort of pleasant, like at a low volume, some Bach or something like that could be nice. And the reason for it is it can help the child to develop perfect pitch hearing if they hear some classical music while they're young. As far as water, ideally you'd like to live somewhere where there's no F minus in the water. It's good to have a whole house carbon filter. For the kitchen, it's good to have a reverse osmosis filter, but you don't want to drink straight reverse osmosis filter, especially not the baby, because it can be over purified, hypoosmolar, too few particles. You can check the TDS, total dissolved solids. TDS meters, they look like a pen. They only cost about $20 last time I checked. And you can squeeze a lemon into it first, have the child eat first, because you don't want osmotic distortions in the blood. Okay, so be a little careful about that. So the good thing about reverse osmosis is it gets the bad stuff out. The bad thing is it takes almost everything out. So that's what you have to watch out for. Okay, talk to the baby a lot, the child a lot. Let them discuss topics with you. Encourage thoughtful, respectful observations and debate. It's real important that they learn how to make observations, analyze their observations, and discuss them with you. And that, you can have an open-ended conversation. Let them speak freely. Frequent conversations with children is one of the hallmarks of children who develop well intellectually. Sort of like Intelligent parents often talk to their child, have little conversations with them, and these kids intellectually are far ahead of children where they don't have that in their childhood. There's something called the zone of proximal development by Vygotsky. He was like a child psychologist, and basically what that means is what the child can do by scaffolding from the parent. The parent essentially shows the child what to do with some task. Let's say it's using building blocks to make a house, okay? And then the child imitates the parent and they could do a lot more. And then the next day the child can do it on their own. And it's like that for a whole bunch of different tasks. So that's called the zone of proximal development, meaning that what the child can do by themselves is less than what they can do with the assistance of a parent or a teacher. But once they've done something, a few times with the parent or the teacher, they can then do it on their own. So you want to constantly be doing that, and that's called scaffolding to help the child increase what they're able to do on their own. Good habits build up over time. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And by that I mean, for example, teaching reading. Some kids read, real fast. When they're 4 years old, they're going to be reading surprisingly well. Other kids are not going to read that well until they're 6 or 7. So don't make it miserable for the kid. Don't criticize the kid or give them a hard time. Some kids just read sooner than others. So the most important thing about reading is that the kids like it. The other thing about teaching reading is you want to use phonics. The phonic method is so much better. It's like a conceptual method. They learn, the sounds of each of the letters. And that's how kids have always been taught reading for a long time, and they did well. The modern method of using look-say, so to speak, it causes markedly increased frequency of dyslexia. Do not trust grade school teachers. The public school system has a lot of good teachers who love the children and do the best they can and try to help the kids. However, the people who design the public school system, they hate children, and they try to make it as bad as possible. They want the kids to be low-functioning chumps. So what I'm trying to say is that some educator tells you, oh, we believe in the look-say method for teaching. Do not listen to them. Do not respect them, okay? They don't know what they're talking about. Encourage a child to read, and the best way to encourage a child to read is to make reading fun. Read to them, bedtime stories and at other moments, and make it enjoyable. The parents should be good role models. The kids, you should have at least one parent who reads every day, and the child should see the parent reading, because then it imprints into their mind that that's what a grown-up does. They read a lot. And that's what my father did, and he read every single night, and that was a very good hobby for me. It kept me out of trouble and provided me a lot of learning and enjoyment, and it later enabled me to solve all kinds of problems in my life by reading. Another thing I screwed up with my kids is I used to buy them books, and they would resent that, just like I'm imposing an obligation on them. It's much better to let the child choose the book. Take them to the library, let them read whatever they want, let them read comic books, whatever thing they like, even if it's absolute nonsense. For example, with my father, we used to watch, British broadcasting of BBC channel of like Victorian novels, okay? Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Thomas Hardy and the Mayor of Casterbridge, okay? And so when I was young, I would watch these things and talk about them with my father, and I would read the books. And, I wanted to be like my dad. And looking back, I realized that I really didn't understand those books. I was just a kid. I didn't have the maturity, sophistication, life experience to understand the psychology of what Tess of the D'Urbervilles was going through, okay? But I still learned a ton of vocabulary. It's like when I was in school, I would do really well in spelling bee and spelling stuff and grammar and writing, even though, like I said, it's better to understand the book. And I used to read a whole bunch of other books. I read all the Encyclopedia Brown and all that kind of stuff. And I read a lot of comic books. So that was good. That was a good part of my education as a kid. And it came from wanting to be like my father. And I had told you in a previous thing about I had a nasty uncle who would come over. This is when I was older. And he would insult my father and me. And then I would read books because he would basically read a book on Saturday and then quiz you about it on Sunday, and you hadn't read the book before, and he would call you an idiot. And even though he was a jerk, it inspired me to read before he was coming over and be ready to have some books that I could question him about. Okay, what else? Really good stuff to read to the kid is all the fairy tales. The logic of the fairy tales is very good, and it provides these visual metaphors. As the kids get a little older, teach them the Greek myths. Right from the beginning, you should start teaching them about the Bible. Learning about the Bible makes people smarter, okay? Don't listen to people who tell you otherwise. They don't know what they're talking about. In order to understand English literature, you have to know about the Bible, okay? You don't have to be a Bible scholar, but you should know the major stories of the Bible, the stuff from Genesis, other big stories in the Bible. You should know Samson, you should know Ruth, you should know, New Testament. All this stuff makes a person more intelligent. It gives them all these historical experience like pieces of knowledge to compare other things to. The ancient Greeks are like the most fascinating group of people ever in history, so you want to study them. They're like cultural golden ages were the ancient Greeks in Athens, like around 400 BC. The Italian Renaissance was an incredible time period and it brought together a lot of things. You want to study that, and you want to study the Victorian Renaissance. The Victorian Renaissance, I mean like the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood and persons like John Ruskin, Cardinal Newman, Oscar Wilde, and Edmund Layton and some of the other great artists, John Everett Millay, just because those are amazing cultural high points, all right? If you want to rate cultural excellence, these three phases are 100 out of 100, okay? The modern world's about a 20 out of 100, okay? So what they do is they tell a kid that's what life could be like. That's what, people could be like. That's what people are capable of. I mean, to see Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, you're like, wow, oh my God, that's what a person could do. It's awesome. They inspire a person. To see Michelangelo's Pietà sculpture is just magnificent. And It's also good for a kid, I think, to draw. Drawing is a great hobby. You can start drawing when you're young, and you can connect it to everything you do for the rest of your life. If a child knows how to draw, when they hand in a paper, a written essay for school, they should hand in a drawing with it. The teacher is going to have a stack of boring, mediocre garbage that they have to go through, and then for them to see a drawing that is enjoyable for the teacher, and it makes the child stand out in the teacher's eyes. Okay, really important that the kids see examples of the adults in the house having non-emotional conversations, and have non-emotional conversations with the child. You want to teach the child to be able to discuss things, including where they're not happy, where they don't get their way, and to control their emotions. The ability to control emotions is a very characteristic sign of high-class intelligent people. Impulsive behavior and having hissy fits, that's all low class, low IQ, ignorant behavior. And so, in order to succeed in this world, you must learn how to control your emotions, and you have to be able to focus on the other person, not just on yourself, to get along well with people. I've seen it. I've seen doctors who I thought were kind of mediocre, but they had really good manners and they're really polite, and everybody sort of liked them and got along with them. I've seen other doctors kind of brilliant, but with impulsive, over emotional personalities, and it caused them problems in their careers. So it's good to, be well educated, knowledgeable, wise, and also be thoughtful and able to control your impulses. Okay, the parents should be the role models, not celebrities. If the parents are not the role models, the kid will have role models that are celebrities, and the celebrities will typically be goof-offs. Some athlete with an earring in their ear who's totally irresponsible and promiscuous and crazy and often substance abusers. You don't want that, okay? The parents should compliment each other in front of the children, okay? Because that encourages the kids to see the parents as a role model. My mother, when I was growing up, would always say, oh, your father is so smart, your father works so hard, your father is so good. And I just took it for granted that she was saying that, and I believed it as true, but that was good for me. It was good that my father was my role model, okay? There were times when my wife would insult me in front of our kids, like call me autistic and stuff and make fun of it, and someone else in the family would make fun of wrestling. I was a wrestler, and so then they said, oh, wrestling's gay, or dad's autistic, he's the autistic guy from Harvard. And I think that was a big mistake on my wife's part, because part of my kids' younger childhood, they didn't think that I really knew what I was talking about. As bizarre as that sounds, the way I would view it is, look, I'm the student athlete of the year at Stanford University, which is the best student athlete university in the whole world. Okay, and I'm the best student athlete there. Okay, that's pretty good. When my kids got older, they're like, wow, Dad, you did all these things. Teach us this, teach us that. But there was a couple years there in their childhood and some of their formative years where they kind of had this mindset, oh, Dad's autistic and wrestling is a stupid sport. So that's a mistake on my wife's part because it delayed their progress. Okay, like I would tell them, look, you need to learn memory techniques, you need to learn study skills, and like, oh, Dad, you're autistic. Other kids don't do that, and I'm like, I know study skills better than anyone in the whole world. Okay, trust me, do this. And years would go by before they would take it seriously, and then they got into college and they would start having trouble with a class. And they're like, oh, Dad, what do I do? And I'm like, do the thing I told you back when you were in junior high. Learn study skills, learn memorization techniques. And then they would do it, but they lost some years intellectually because, we had some fundamental disagreements between my wife and I. She wanted the children to have cell phones right away so she could send them to their friend's house and they'd be able to call her when they needed a ride home. And I said, look, I grew up with no cell phone. I was just fine. When they want to come home, they can use their friend's cell phone and call you and then get a ride home. They should not have cell phones. This was a major disagreement between my wife and I know I'm right, but in general, the wife tends to control what happens in the family and with the kids. Because I saw children's IQs drop. For example, my daughter, I think her IQ dropped about 30 points as soon as my wife got her a cell phone. Before that, she would read books and she would talk to me about the books she was reading. We would have intelligent conversations. As soon as she got a cell phone, I forget the age, it might have been 7th grade or something. As soon as she got a cell phone, she stopped talking to me. She stopped reading. All she cared about was being with her friends. And I'm going to say something else about friends. I think friends at a grade school age, junior high age, and even at a high school age are largely overrated. Yes, it's good to have friends. Of course it is. But friends have a tremendous influence on children. And schools are designed to make them all stupid. By that I mean they group children all to be the same age together. And when children are all the same age together, that means they all know about the same amount and they can't teach each other anything. So instead of the focus being on education, the focus is just on popularity. And in order to be popular, then that starts leading to partying, romance, kissing, fooling around, and all that other stuff. Potentially drinking alcohol, all kinds of stupid stuff. And that does not help them intellectually. I can also tell you we've all gone to high school reunions or other things, in our 20s or 30s or whatever. And the amazing thing is how nice and polite everyone behaves. Oh, how are you? Nice to see you. The point I'm saying is even the stupidest, biggest jerk from grade school or high school, by the time they're in their 20s, they've got pretty good behavior and social manners. So what I'm saying is, a retarded moron can learn social skills. It doesn't take that much to learn social skills, so you shouldn't worry about that too much. Plus, most of the social skills that kids learn are bad. The social skills they learn from their parents or from people that are trying to teach them and help them are going to be good. They should spend more time around those peoples and less time around kids that just want to be cool and popular and all that other stuff. Not only that, cell phones also make children stupid because they start wanting to only become popular and they're worried about getting their next text message. They'll sleep with the cell phone next to their head. Bad idea. The cell phones release, electromagnetic radiation. Usually they're like low power microwave transmitters that open up voltage gated calcium channels in the brain. And that causes increased neuron activity. You increase cytoplasmic calcium, it's going to make that neuron, for example, release its neurotransmitter, which can cause anxiety, can decrease sleep a little bit over time, can lead to decreased cognitive performance. It's obviously a distraction, a form of noise. The other thing is, I think that being lonely, you don't want to be too lonely. You don't want to be lonely all the time. But I think being lonely actually makes people smarter. The reason I say that is I had plenty of times in my life was lonely, and believe me, I did not like it. The worst was when I was in college at Stanford and I didn't know anybody. But when you're lonely, you have to learn how to entertain yourself, and sooner or later, an intelligent person who's lonely starts to read a lot, and you learn to get used to reading a lot. So I think a child would be better off, being alone and lonely reading than they would with, misbehaving friends. Also, at these ages, junior high and high school, their peers have tremendous influence on them, much more than their parents do. So you have to be very careful who your child hangs around with. If they're hanging around with somebody smoking cigarettes, they'll smoke cigarettes. If they're hanging around with somebody doing MJ, the kid's at risk to do MJ or drink alcohol. Bad habits are contagious, so be very, very careful who your kid hangs around with. And like I said, it's overrated. The next thing is for developing intelligence, it's important to have quiet time alone. Quiet time alone, thinking, reading, or having intelligent conversations with a parent. And Mike Merzenich has done a lot of research on the brain. He's a PhD guy he was like one of the inventors of the cochlear implant. And he says if you want to improve a brain, you train it. You practice piano, you get better at piano. You practice reading about a subject, you get better at it, okay? He says if you want to worsen a brain, just add noise. So noise could be anything from loud music. The worst music is beat music. I hate beat music. And the reason I say that is I'm always thinking about something. And the beat, bump, 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 it pushes the thought out of your brain. You can't think when there's beat music on. Your brain just gets, coordinated, entranced by the beat, and you can't think. It makes you stupid. Um, Hair dryers. I hate hair dryers. You don't need a hair dryer. Dry your hair with a towel. Okay, you don't need a hair dryer. Hair dryers make people stupid. They not only EMF the brain, the loud noise contributes to becoming deaf. I don't like blenders and smoothies and all that stuff. I know some people do. If you insist on doing it, wear ear protectors. Okay, that machine is really loud. My wife, she's getting fat. She says, "Well, I'm going to eat these smoothies to make me skinny and healthy again." And I'm like, just eat the plant foods. If you do the blender without doing the earphones, you're going to be deaf as well. It's just stupid. You just eat the plant foods, and you have to go 100% on it. Don't go 50%, or you're not going to get the results. Loud music. Okay. You don't want loud music. You don't want loud TV set. You shouldn't be watching TV, like the parents making noise when the kids are trying to study. That's rude and it's ignorant. You don't even need a TV in your house. TV has nothing to offer. Anything you want to watch, you could find on a computer. Why watch it on a TV? TV is designed for low IQ people. Think about it. In order to have a lot of persons available for advertising, they tend to have to cater to stupid people. A lot of people watch TV at night after they come home from work when their cognitive function is at its lowest. So TV is kind of centered around an IQ of about 90, 95 or something like that. It's almost always like this, low class, lousy entertainment. It's vulgar. It's bad. Okay, what else? When the child's born, it's a good idea to start beginning L2 and L3 as soon as possible. That means L2 is language number 2, language number 3. Kids learn languages automatically if they're exposed to as a baby and a young child, so why not do that? Once the child knows how to say no and realizes English is the common language of the USA, then they're not going to want to learn the other languages. If you as a parent speak another language, you should only speak in that other language to the child as much as possible. If you can find a babysitter who speaks another language, get them to talk to your child only in that other language. And your kid will automatically learn that language because their brain has like a window of development, especially that first year where they can learn all the different sounds and nuance of the other language. The older they get, the more that window closes. And if you only hear English when you're young, you will be less able to ever learn the other languages or hear all the sounds or pronounce all the sounds. So that's an important point. Okay, let's see. One thing too, for example, my kid learned Polish from birth, and then I later on tried to teach him Spanish, and the kid could read Spanish like perfectly. I'm like, how the heck could this kid read Spanish so well? And it's because he already knew Polish. It wasn't because he knew English. And just being able to make the sounds takes a lot of effort. When I, taught myself some Polish, my face hurt for about 3 months for making all those weird consonant sounds. But anyways, learn them from birth and you'll have a bunch of languages. The more language you have, the easier it is to learn a subsequent language. The bigger your vocabulary is going to be. Eventually, it lowers your risk of dementia speaking two languages just because it takes a lot of brain power to constantly switch back and forth between languages. Okay, for musical instruments, piano is the best one. It kind of takes them into the world of classical music. I like guitar because you can carry it with you anywhere, but the danger is the kid will get into all the rock and roll and drugs and craziness. If they do study a musical instrument, they should study great performance. Whatever they do, they should study the great performers in that thing they do because you'll learn from that. I really don't like drums because they're so noisy and they're loud. I think they make people stupid. Drummers are kind of notoriously the stupidest musicians. It's important that the child gets enough sleep. You get smarter in sleep. Your brain cleans itself during sleep. So you want to provide time for that. Next topic, high school activities. Debate team is great if your high school has that. That's like one of the best things you could do. Being on the math team is good. Like I knew this Asian lady doctor, and she said that her daughter in high school got a perfect score 800 on the math SATs, and I'm like, well, wow, she must be really smart at math. And the lady said, oh, no, she just does math every day because she's on the math team. And there's some truth in that. Maybe the kid is real smart, but the point I'm saying is if you do math on a daily basis, you'll get a lot better at math. Okay. Junior Engineering and Technical Society. Chess Club is good. If you're around smart people, you become smarter. Like I said, if your kid hangs around with, drinkers and smokers, the kid will be a drinker and a smoker. If the kid hangs around with, chess club, math team, junior engineering, technical society, debate team, the kid will be a thinker, he'll be smarter. Something like Spanish club can be good if there's conversation, because that's how you learn a language, by conversation, communication. The school system is all fake. It's a joke. I've never in my whole life met a single person, not one, who learned Spanish from classes at the high school or the college level. Because they're almost all of them, they teach grammar, okay? Nobody learns language from grammar. And there's no one who learned English as a child by the grammar. You learn it from communicating, ideally from conversation, but you can also learn a language from reading it. Okay. Teach your kids that modern pop culture is like a psyop, and it's all a big lie just to turn them into chumps and the minimum wage chumps. Like I said, the public school system, there's a lot of excellent teachers who love the kids, who are bright and do the best they can to help those kids. But overall, the system itself is designed to make people into minimum wage chumps, to be atheistic, to reject their parents' values, to sort of be so open-minded that their brain falls out, and to really sort of prepare them to be a minimum wage slave conformist mentality. Tennis is probably the best sport. You can play with men, you can play with women, you can play it your entire life. You'll meet a lot of wealthy people and you'll be around wealthy people, so you learn good manners, you learn how to dress, how to behave, the etiquette, everything that goes with it. Gets you in good physical shape. Actually, running is a good sport if you have a place to run. A lot of people live in a city and there's no good place to run or no safe place to run. But running is good. It builds mental toughness, ability to delay gratification and to persevere in the face of difficulty and pain. The same thing that, like I said, I don't know if you saw my picture of the cross country runners at my high school. It was like half the kids on my cross country team had over 700 on their SAT in math. Okay, they're very smart, and it was just a regular high school. There's nothing special about my high school. I'd call it middle class, upper middle class. Running, they were the best students in the whole school. Running brings that out in people. Avoid any sport with traumatic brain injury. No, I think soccer is a bad sport just because they hit the ball at their head. If they didn't hit the ball at their head, it'd be a great sport, but they do. Football, it's a ton of fun, and I did play tackle football in 7th and 8th grade, but if I could do it all over again, I would not play football. Even though it's a ton of fun, it was about the most fun sport there is, sooner or later you're going to start picking up head trauma, okay? Especially you get older, those guys are big. The reason I quit football was because I made the all-star team, and then we had to play in the all-Catholic all-star game. And there was this guy from the other team, and I was supposed to block him. Okay, and he weighed about 70 pounds more than me. And what I realized at that moment was I would never be able to effectively block that guy. He was a monster compared to me, okay? And I realized football's not my sport. I'm better off in wrestling. And wrestling is where I belong, where you compete against somebody your own size. So, a lot of these guys, too. I lived in the football dorm at Stanford. And, these guys were, 6'4", 260 pounds. They're giants, okay? So, how big you are matters a lot for a sport. Like, if you're, 6'7", basketball, you're going to be better at basketball. So, it just is what it is. So, again, avoid any sport where there's head trauma. And, if you're going to do MMA or something, find a subtype of it where you don't get punched in the head. If you're getting punched in the head, don't do it. You need your brain every day the rest of your life, okay? Eventually, if your kid gets really into something, tennis, piano, or any other activity or sport, you're going to have to seek out better coaches. Some of them you can find online, but you might have to find one in person, have to drive the kid, and it's worth it to drive the kid. I screwed up with one of my kids. One of my kids is a really good tennis player, and he won some tournament, and he wanted to sort of move up to the next level of competition. And I was working, my wife was working. We didn't have anybody who could conveniently drive the kid. And he got pissed off and he quit. And I should have hired somebody to drive the kid. I screwed up. But anyways, that's a long story. Kids should be taught about a growth mindset, the fact that if you believe you can get better, you get a lot better faster. Like if some people think that being smart is just something you're born with, a fixed academic ability, then they don't try hard. If they realize, well, gee, if you try harder, you study more, you practice more, you learn the methods of the field, you can get a lot better. That's called the growth mindset. It's especially popularized by Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist. You can get a lot better. And I told you previously before, I went from not even being in honors classes in high school to, being first in my class in med school. And it's because I learned all these study skills and I learned how to get good at school. The other thing for a child to realize is you don't get better overnight. This Anders Ericsson guy studied excellent performance, and he found that typically it takes 10,000 hours of practice in most fields before a person can be considered, expert level, so to speak. That's not even being great. That's just being so-called expert level. So it takes a lot of time. Okay, and I like to quote that, if you practice more, you get better faster. And then you also not only you need to practice, you need so-called deliberate practice, meaning that practicing with the emphasis on getting better, where you do the challenging things. You spend a lot of time beyond your comfort zone trying to improve the parts of your skill development that are challenging for you. Okay. The parents should also be reading about child development and how to help children develop their intellect. For example, this is a masterpiece of an essay by Ayn Rand called Comprachicos. And it's where she talks about that, like even it's beginning at the preschool level, that if a kid spends time around other kids the same age, the focus is on popularity and it makes the children stupid. It's an absolutely brilliant essay, and it's true. Because I know that when I look back on my life, the times I was focused on hanging around with my friends, all we cared about was chasing girls, okay? Versus the times when I was by myself, man, I spent a lot of time thinking. Or when I was, talking to somebody else who was more knowledgeable than me, I learned a ton at those times. Okay, Tiger Mom by Amy Chua, which is largely about how Chinese parents tend to emphasize education for a lot for their kids. And I've seen that too. Like I one time was talking to this guy from Okinawa, and he told me how the sense of honor and respect for parents was so important. Okinawa is sort of like what Hawaii is to America, Okinawa is Japan. And how you were expected to do better in academics than your parents had, and all this honor and respect and all this stuff. It's good for kids, okay? It can be a pain in the ass, it can be overdone, but it's also good for kids. Okay, Super Memory, Super Student by Harry Lorraine is the best book for introduction to memory techniques. I mean, what is grade school, high school, and even grad school in most places? It's just a memory contest. Whoever can memorize more stuff faster is the best student. You don't really have to think much. You just have to memorize a lot of stuff. Okay? And then I wrote a book, Straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard, which is really about study skills. How did I go from, being a sort of just a little bit above average high school student to being, getting a perfect score on my boards and radiology, okay, as a resident, real competitive field. Because I learned all these study techniques and memorization techniques, how to manage time and all that stuff. I also wrote another book, How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius. Because if you define a genius as being an IQ of 140, and study skills, memorization techniques can increase academic performance, 30 to 40 points. Somebody with a relatively average IQ can perform at so-called genius level 140. Um, let's see. Review the child's papers from school. When a child writes a paper, that's a big opportunity for learning. One of the most valuable things you could do is sit there and go over the papers with the child, because to teach writing is to teach thinking. When you're editing, you're thinking. You're analyzing a lot of things. How will the person reading this experience this sentence, this paragraph? Does it flow? Does it make sense? Is it appropriately linked to the previous paragraph, the subtitle heading, whatever? A lot of thinking goes into writing effectively, and that makes a person smarter. When kids read, as far as reading, and you're teaching them, encourage them to read biographies. If people learn history by memorizing dates, they tend to forget almost everything. But if they learn about some of the strong personalities of a given time, they will remember that much better. Like, let's say you're going to study the Italian Renaissance. Learn about Pope Julius. Learn about Michelangelo, about Da Vinci, about Raphael. Okay? That will smart you up real fast. Or Caravaggio. Okay? If you're also, when you learn a subject, you also want to see the concepts, how to chunk things together. It's like the chunking memory technique. The way we learn anything is by comparing it to what we already know and putting it into a category. A dog goes bow wow, a cat goes meow. That's how we learn everything, okay? That's how the brain maps cognitive space, by comparisons, metaphors, analogies, and categories. So you also, when you teach, good to explain to the child, if it's not already obvious, explain to them, this is why something's important to know. Always show a reason for learning stuff, because when we learn stuff for a reason, we remember that quite often the rest of our life. The reason why we forget almost everything from grade school and high school is because it's meaningless, okay? It's just memorization. Typical high school and college and even grad school, they focus on being comprehensive. We're going to cover this entire topic. Hang on to your hats. We're going to cover this entire topic. That's actually not what matters. What matters is, what are the important things to know about this topic? Because when they teach based on being comprehensive, know all these things, you end up quite often forgetting almost everything. Versus if you just say, here's what you need to know about this organ. Here's what you need to know about the liver. Here's what you need to know about the kidney. That's memorable. Versus, here's the 200 things that you're supposed to memorize for the test about the kidney or the liver. Almost all of that's forgotten, and they don't necessarily know what's important or what's not important. Okay, so teach in chronological order. If you learn history, they should know the ancient Greeks came before the ancient Romans, came before and overlap with Jesus Christou, and that was before the Middle Ages, and that was before the Renaissance. Okay, and then later on came the Victorian Renaissance. Okay, that is a logical way to do it. In addition, it's good to teach with art, because art sort of beautifies a lot of things and it makes it more enjoyable to learn, and we can memorize a picture much faster than other things. So it's very good to show the pictures. Like if you teach the ancient Greeks, show them pictures that illustrate those times and the statues, for example. Music history goes very well when you teach things, after 1600 or so. And the way the music relates to the history of that time is very helpful for learning. As far as schools, by far the best school for a child is homeschool. Because think about it, if you forget almost everything they learn, as they do in grade school and high school and much of college, stuff you learn at home, you tend to remember that. It's the best place for education. I mean, I teach myself stuff all the time, but I'm older and I know how to focus on what I want. But I realize for hardly anyone is that possible. When I was young, almost all the moms stayed home. Divorce was rare, and women seldom had to work, so it was easy to homeschool in those days. It's more difficult nowadays. Also, there's all this pressure to put the kid in child school, preschool, and stuff. I think most of those places are bad. If you can, it's good to have some way the child can learn at home. Okay, and if you hire a babysitter, don't just get one that'll change the kid's diapers. If you can, if it's possible, try to find one who knows something useful to teach the child, either a language or religion or fairy tales or something. If you can't homeschool, the next best thing is a religious private school, because that way they also learn the religion. In my experience, I went to a Catholic school for part of my education. There was no significant difference in the education versus a public school. However, learning the religious stuff was highly valuable, and the behavior of the kids was 1,000 times better than it was at the public school. A non-religious private school will be the next step up. Public schools are the absolute worst. They're a disaster. And again, I know there's a lot of excellent public school teachers. I know there's public school teachers who love the children and really do the best they can. But to me, it's kind of like the medical system. There's a lot of doctors who really want to help the patient and do the best they can. But the bottom line is the conventional medical system is designed on selling drugs. And they're going to have to sell a lot of drugs if they want to keep their jobs. So even though there's a lot of doctors who really want to do a good job, it's hard for them in a field like internal medicine to not end up being a drug dealer, because otherwise, how are they going to pay their bills? And then, the same thing in the public school. They're going to have to teach the lesson plan, and the lesson plan is going to be stupid, and they're going to have to focus on a standardized test, which is going to be stupid. And once you've done all this stupid stuff, there's not a lot of time left over to learn useful stuff, to learn the stuff you want. I've heard somebody describe grade school and high school as being forced to go to a place you don't want to go to and being taught by a person who's a stranger things that you don't want to know, okay? Versus think about how you learn on your own. Could you imagine any adult being put into a room where they have to listen to strangers talk for 8 hours about things they don't care about? That'd be a ridiculous, painful, punishing waste of time. Okay, I remember when I was in grade school and high school and junior high, I'd be looking out the window just bored out of my mind. I think I told you previously, I got suspended from school a bunch of times in like third and fourth grade, and I got put in a special classroom called a pod where I had to be alone by myself. And it wasn't, I wasn't a bad kid. I could do the homework or whatever the assignment was in 5 seconds, and then I would want to joke around and entertain my friends. We'd have paper airplanes or whatever. We're just silliness, but they thought I was a distraction to the class, and I wasn't even allowed to sit in the class for about 2 years. And so what I'm saying is if I was back in school nowadays, they would have drugged me, called me attention deficit and drugged me, okay? And that's pretty much what I think of schools. Look, because I studied lots of geniuses, and almost all these geniuses, from the old days, of course, were homeschooled, okay? And with tutors sometimes, etc. Okay, if I had to go to high school again, I would do XP, experimental program. And that way you can kind of have a self-designed program. Some schools allow you to do that. That way you don't have to waste time with all the required classes that regular kids have to take. But that would require, a self-disciplined, motivated kid. So anyways, these are some things up through the high school age that'll help a kid. I hope this was helpful.